thanks so much for having us, or being with us today. We really appreciate it. Do you want to tell us a little bit about who you are and what your background is?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm Catherine Paganini. I'm the head of marketing at Buoyant. That's the creator of Linkerd. And so very involved in the Linkerd community, but I also do a lot of things with the CNCF. So I'm the co-chair of the tag contributor strategy and the business value subcommittee.
Oh, gotcha. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Linkerd first? Because I think, there may not be a ton of people who know what it's for.
Yeah, so basically Linkerd is a service mesh. It's actually the first service mesh, and it's and our team actually is the team who coined that term, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
And it's the only graduated service mesh, and kind of known for its simplicity, right? That is, kind of what we're trying to do, make it easier for people to adopt a service mesh which provides observability, reliability, and security features at a platform level, right? You want to make it easy, because that's really, really critical features that you need. Right,
yeah, I mean, I think what people don't realize a lot of the time when they're kind of architecting an application kind of in their head is like the complexity of like kind of running all the time, right? And how hard that actually is to make true. And I think kind of the advent of the service mesh concept, Kubernetes in general with orchestration, but that particular subcategory really makes a big difference to how that works. And so was it the first Linkerd Day that was yesterday? Oh.
Yeah. So Linkerd Day was yesterday, very first time. And I'm very proud that we managed to have like 100% end user content. For me, it's always really my favorite part of the job is really working with the community, working with end users, and empowering them to, or help them, tell the stories. Because I feel, even at KubeCon, I think there are far too many vendors speaking, and I know it's always difficult to kind of get. It's not as easy, right, to get end users to speak. But I think end users
can't, right?
Yeah, and because end user stories are so much more powerful, right? Because it's I know vendors are always biased, right? Like even if you believe that you are telling the truth, which we all are, right? But we are biased, right? Because that's why we work for those companies, right? And then having end users who are actually using it in production and sharing their experience with peers, I think that's the most powerful. Those are the most powerful stories. So, so we had Adidas share their story, and lots of other companies, and it was really, really great. I think so really proud about that.
That's cool. Was there any particular stories that really kind of caught your ear, as it were?
Well, I think one of them is I think that was a very catchy story as well. What was the name of the talk? Going to production with a team of one, right? And she basically got it, the whole thing. She was responsible for the platform, and at the end it was just her, and she got Linkerd up and running, and was new to the service mesh, and just hearing that it doesn't have to be complex, right? People think it is so I already adopted Kubernetes. It's complex enough. I don't want to add an additional complexity layer, right? And it's true, sometimes that's the case, but it doesn't have to be, right? There are simple ways of doing that. And then hearing her story and how she kind of managed to do it with one person is kind of speaks for itself, that it doesn't have to be complex. So I think that was kind of a good story that.
Yeah, no, that is a cool story. I mean, it's always nice, especially someone who's new to the thing, right, and is able to, kind of understand enough that they need it, right, and then figure out how to actually implement it and then deploy it. That's not a trivial exercise, you know. So that's really cool. So what do you think is kind of next for Linkerd? Do you want to kind of come back in North America and do the same kind of thing, or sorry, for Linkerd Day? Or do you maybe do in smaller events?
We're thinking about it. I think it was a really great experience. If we do it again as well, we would love to have also a very big end user focus. But yeah, so we'll have to see. We'll have to see. But like for now, I think like if the CNCF is happy with it, and so like probably. But it is also like a lot of. It's of course it's a CNCF event, but it's a lot of work on our end as well. Like, especially if you wanna, if you want like if you want to encourage end users to, because you have to find them, right? It's like. Vendors are always happy to speak about what they do, right? But identifying the end users and encouraging them, and it's like because they're busy, is a lot of work. So, which is why like you are then so proud when you manage to kind of have that lineup, right?
Yeah, I run a smallish conference. It's about 400 people called DevConf US in the US, and it is. There's a lot of work that goes into it that I don't think people realize how much effort it really is to kind of put a show on. And my running joke is for the first 2 years of it, both years I blew out a pair of shoes with the amount of walking around I did for the 3 days of trying to keep the fires put out. So what do you hope to see at the rest of KubeCon? Like, what is the hope for the rest of the conference?
Well, so it's fun because it's like after Linkerd Day, it feels like okay, this is and I was like, oh, actually, the conference just started.
Right.
So so I mean, I'm gonna be at the Linkerd kiosk mostly. We also have like a Buoyant booth. Of course, we're gonna be there and hopefully get like really good conversations and tell more people about Linkerd. And but also like I'll be on 2 panels.
That's
so
cool.
looking forward to that. One for the tag contributor strategy.
That's what I was gonna ask about.
So I'm co-chair of the tag contributor strategy, and one of the things that we always try to do is like, once is or maybe I should just say like what the tag contributor strategy actually does. Does that make sense?
That's cool.
So basically, the tag contributor strategy is a tag, so technical advisory group, the CNCF, that tries to help projects be successful. So it's like more geared towards helping project maintainers. And I love the mission because basically what we're trying to achieve is to create like a cross-project community. Because we always talk in open source about communities, but we mostly talk about our own communities, right? And I think we figured that out. People know it's important, right? But I don't think we kind of have really done a good job yet to kind of have the cross-project community, right? Because it's like every project has going and is going through the same problems, right? And every problem that a project is going through, someone else has already gone through, right? And a lot of projects try to reinvent the wheel each time, right? And there is no need for that, right? And basically the CNCF is our common home, right? All our projects live there. And it provides this platform for us to connect. And I think what we want to do is kind of build that cross-project community so that we talk with each other, exchange ideas, learn from one another, and then, just make it easier. Because people have best practices identified, or more mature projects have identified best practices, and let's tell newer project those best practices, right? Don't let them do the same mistakes. And then there are lots of resources and things like that. And so I think like it's incredibly valuable, but not a lot of people know about it. Not a lot of maintainers. And that's the other challenge, because it's like maintainers is like a subgroup within our community, right? And like reaching them is not that easy. And so this panel, because we always talk about the resources we create, this panel, we wanted to talk about what we get out of that, right? Because it's a lot of times we talk about contributing, and people think about contributing as like giving, and it is giving, right? But you get actually so much more out of it than you give. And so we wanted to make a little twist and talk about like really like us and how it has benefited us in our careers and everything,
to be
right?
a part of that community,
because it is like
contribute into
it. Because it is really, I think like once you start, you get hooked and there is no going back. I feel
Yeah. I mean, one of the things when I kind of first joined the Fedora community, and got really kind of involved in it, one of the things that I found, which was really interesting, was, like how I could have like kind of an impact, on every location that I went to, and that there was a Fedora community everywhere, and so I could kind of, participate in it wherever I happen to be traveling, which is a really, kind of nice feeling to have that community out there. And I think with Kubernetes, I think we're starting to see more of that, as you say, kind of trying to get the overall community to also be more together rather than the individual kind of silos, which is kind of good for everyone.
Yeah.
But
it is sometimes it is like, I feel like people, like maintainers, are so busy that sometimes they feel it's like they don't have time, right, to do an engage in an additional community. But I think what people maybe I don't know if they don't realize, but it's like, I think you end up saving time too, right? Like, for instance, if you need to know about something, right? Like, or when I joined the tag, one thing that I need, like, I had just joined Linkerd, and I had no idea, because I was new to open source, how communities tick and whatever. So it gives you the chance to actually talk to people who will be very gracious with their time. So I interviewed several maintainers who took, I think, a whole hour to talk to me and share their best practices. And if I couldn't just go to people and say like, hey, I want to learn this just for Linkerd. Can you tell us to me, right? Like, but I told them, hey, I want to learn this. I'm new to open source, and I want to contribute. Like, I want to summarize the best practices, in a doc that we can share with all the projects. And then suddenly people are really gracious. Like, they're really kind of taking the time to do that. So, like, you don't have access to those types of resources if you're doing it just for yourself.
There's not enough, right, to get that critical mass to, because everyone's busy, and if you're going around to whatever 50 people versus 1,000 people, you get some more time, which is a big deal. I think that's. We've also interviewed like Chris Short on the show before, who's always been a big kind of contributor, participant in trying to get the same kinds of things. I think it's. I think in some ways it's the magic of open source. But the other thing I was going to say was that one of the things that it takes a while to learn, I think, is as a manager, right, is how to delegate, right, and how to teach somebody to do something new, even though it's going to take them longer to do it the first time. I think there's a lot of that with kind of the contributor world as well, is that the temptation is just do it yourself, right, rather than kind of opening it up for others, because it feels easier. But I think you don't realize, right, is that as you grow the community, your whatever force multiplier goes way up.
Well, it's always you have to invest a little bit,
right,
and then for it to kind of save you time
later.
So it's like it's counterintuitive, because first you think, and it's not counterintuitive, but I think like it's just.
It's hard to get over the hurdle.
Yeah, you're so busy thinking about the now that sometimes it's like, you don't want to. You're just focused on like what you need to do next, but like it is really an investment in the future, because then it gets easier, right? Yeah.
I think I wanted to turn left here, but I guess we'll go another. Oh, I have a red light. Another block and turn left there. Cool. So what's the other panel you're doing?
The other one is about. It's more around the work that I do for the Business Value Subcommittee. And so, again, like let's maybe just start with what the Business Value Subcommittee is. I'm non-technical, right? And so 2017, I joined a Kubernetes company and had to kind of wrap my head all around it, which was really, really difficult, because like all the content out there is written for a technical audience. And it starts with context that you don't have if you're not technical. So it's really hard, right? Like, so I really struggled. I had actually to study, really. I actually bought a Introduction to Computer Science book, and like, because I had to build kind of like that the baseline to actually even understand what people are talking about. And then suddenly, like a few years later, like people from my network, not people who don't necessarily work in cloud native, started to ask me, so hey, my company is doing Kubernetes now, can you explain that to me? And then I was like, like there are a lot of people who are non-technical who need to know about this and who are basically in the same boat as I was, right? Like, and not everyone has the time or the dedication to kind of go through and like really kind of learn it, right? And so in between, like I started writing articles that I kind of for the news stack, like really basic fundamental articles, and got really good feedback, which kind of showed that there is a need for that, right?
Yep.
And then at some point I said like, okay, actually the CNCF, I mean, it's great. I'm really grateful for the news stack for publishing it, and it was a really great experience. But at some point I was like, shouldn't the CNCF own this kind of content? You know, like it's like they have content for technical people, but like it's really important. It's an important part of their mission to kind of help the business side as well, right? Because they need to approve all these projects, right? So if you the C-suite needs to understand the basic concepts. They don't need to code and stuff, but they need to understand what cloud native is, how it works, and why they should adopt it.
Right.
Because otherwise, how can they even have these conversations with engineering, right? And so we formed the Business Value Subcommittee, which basically focuses on trying to explain these concepts in terms that a business audience understands, but also making it easy for engineers, right? Like if an engineer is new to cloud native, like having content that is really easily accessible and simple language makes it easier to understand, right? Than something that's full of technical terms and simple is always easier and friendlier when you're getting started.
Well, I think one of the things that people, especially non-technical people, don't realize about cloud native is that it's kind of fundamentally at odds with a lot of the way you're taught programming. So when you take a computer science degree or whatever, I kind of refer to it as like everything's very like serial. You know, everything kind of goes in a straight line. And when you are doing something that is cloud native or event driven or something like that, you know, you kind of have all these things like popping off all over the place. And writing your applications such that you can respond to that kind of scenario is kind of weird. And it's a mindset shift even for technical people. And I think that, you know, like you're kind of mostly focused on the non-technical people, but I think there is definitely a lot to be learned for your average technical person to try to wrap their head around how do you design systems that run in this kind of unusual, you know, model. Although it's getting increasingly unusual or increasingly usual. You know, because you have to be able to operate your systems this way. Otherwise, it just, you know, you can't run a modern application anymore, you know? So it's really interesting. And so would you say that's related to the glossary that you were
Well, yeah, so basically, like, so we formed the Business Value Subcommittee, and then we realized, okay, if we're talking about these things, the first thing we need to do is explain the terms, right? Like, you cannot just start, like, so we need to first come to an agreement. How do we talk about these terms? And so the glossary was basic. So it's a cloud native glossary. It's open source. Anyone can contribute and help improve it. So that's the idea, right? To have like, it's community driven. So one thing that's important is that is community driven. It's vendor neutral, right? And it's a living document. And so the glossary, I think, was launched a year and a half ago. And as I mentioned, tries to explain these concepts in simple words. We try to stay away from technical terms whenever possible, using examples people can relate to when we're talking about applications. Let's talk about end user applications like your Gmail account or things that people use to make it more friendly for people who are not technical.
Well, I think that's the big challenge, both in the definitions and the words themselves, right? Is, you know, our industry. You know, I say this kind of thing a lot, but our industry is so young, right? You know, I kind of jokingly, it's like medicine's been around for thousands of years, so we have a pretty good idea of what all the words mean. And you know, with the software world, we're kind of inventing new stuff all the time, and approaches and models and styles and everything. And so as a result, we are not very good about solidifying around terminology. And so I think it's even more useful, I think, than people even realize, not just from an educational perspective, but also it's hugely useful to be able to pin down what a term means, so that we can at least collectively agree that there was a pigeon that flew by. Because I would throw back to the geese. But the collectively agree on what the terms mean. Which I think is hugely important and really difficult. I talk about it with my students. It's like, if you walk into an organization and they say PM, that could be program manager, project manager, or product manager, and it could be any of those. And none of those jobs are the same, but they will all use the acronym meaning one of them exclusively. And it'll be a different one at different places. So one of the things, like I said, that I find super difficult in our industry is terminology and kind of pinning it down so that you and I, when we say PM, both mean the same thing. And I think it's even crazier, right, when you talk about, like I said before, like event-driven architectures, which are even newer than traditional like N-tier models and stuff. So yeah, super cool. Well,
something that's like, just because it's like something that is also very cool is that we have several localization teams localizing it, and so I don't even remember how many languages are live right now.
That's a good sign. That's a good sign.
Well, it's not that many, but it's like I don't know, have the exact numbers, but like definitely German, Spanish, Korean, Mandarin.
Oh wow.
I forgot. I'm probably forgetting some, but it's like an Urdu.
Oh, really?
Just became live yesterday.
Yeah, nice.
So you have to have like at least 10 terms to go live, and that's another Italian as well as live. Because that's another thing. Like in our world, everything is written in English, like most of it. And like we were just talking about how complex cloud native is, right? And so if you're trying to learn it and then it's in a foreign language on top of that,
right,
makes it even more difficult, right? And then like really kind of having content in different languages makes it much more accessible, because some people, like, it just depends on which. Some countries are really like people or engineers, most engineers do speak very well English, others not, right? It's not in some countries it's not common, to have like good be proficient in English, right? And you cannot, and then you're basically excluding all these people because you're not giving them the tools they need to kind of learn these concepts, right? So I think like the localization efforts are really important too. So. And especially those tiny languages. When I get like these languages like Urdu, I was like, this is so cool.
Right. When I mean, that's personally one of the things I like the most in the kind of open source world is when you get something completely unexpected, like unlooked for, as a contribution to whatever you're working on. It's like I built a plugin for Vagrant many years ago, and and people started using it, right? And like I was so excited because I had just kind of built it, to solve a problem I was having, and but then people started using it, and then I didn't really need it anymore, and so we had some people take it over because they used it and they continued to use it, and I was so excited, completely unexpected. I think that's one of the really cool things about open source, and really, I mean, technically, it's communities in general. But in being a tech guy, right? Like the community I see the most is tech communities. So yeah, it's really interesting. Well, why don't we kind of end the interview there? And thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. And we will continue our merry way to go over lots and lots of speed bumps. But I hope it wasn't too exciting.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having it. This was a lot of fun to talk about all the little things that we're doing out there.
Right.